Hello, folks. Welcome back to Celebrate Recovery's Principles and Testimonies. I'm your host, Jason. If you're new to this channel and you like what you see, hit that like button and subscribe and hit the little notification bell if you want future episodes. It's very much appreciated. It helps my channel grow a whole lot. Today, with that, let's just jump into it. Today, we're on Principle 2, Testimony, from the Celebrate Recovery's Leader's Guide. Let me get me arranged here. How is everybody? I'm doing good. Principle 2, Testimony. My name is Jamie, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with anger. As a little girl, I had many dreams of becoming... Wait, before we jump into it, today's video is brought to you by James 414 Vape Sales. That's James 414 Vape Sales. They're out on 461, going from Mount Vernon, going towards Somerset, Kentucky. So if you're through there and you guys like to vape, which I do, go ahead and give them a shout out. They got vapes and all different kind of flavors. They got coils. They got everything pretty much you need, vape and accessories, and they got really good deals. So if you guys want to, go ahead and stop through there and check them out. My name is Jamie, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with anger. As a little girl, I had many dreams of becoming successful and living happily ever after until reality stepped in. Growing up, there were many lies that I believed about myself. One of the most deeply rooted lies for me was that I would never amount to anything. I was convinced that these lies were true by my circumstances, wrong choices, and the abusive relationships that surrounded me. My dysfunction started at a young age, beginning with my parents' abusive relationship. My father was an abusive man who had his own addictions and who would habitually lose self-control. This caused me to hide in my closet and tremble with fear. I would hear them yelling and screaming in the next room, my dad yelling with anger and my mother screaming in fear. I didn't understand why they behaved this way. While hiding in my closet, I often comforted myself by saying that everything would be okay. My mother eventually packed us up and left my father. As much as I wanted it to be okay, it only got worse. My mom became angry and an addict, and all that came with it. She was no longer my protector, but she became the person who continued to drill into my mind that I was good for nothing. I always called it a good for nothing. For many years, I dealt with verbal abuse that would break me down into nothing, as well as physical abuse that would constantly make me fearful and on guard. I became hypervigilant, and through it all of the circumstances, I eventually became addicted to anger, drugs, alcohol, and promiscuity. I really wanted a way of escape. My mom was either working at happy hour or at nightclubs. I didn't have any supervision as a child, so my free time was free reign. Usually what I did was with my time was drink and use drugs with my friends. I had friends who were various ages, and I found that I was good at manipulating people into getting what I wanted. So good that I met a guy friend who often lent me his car. I was 16 and he was 30. My days consisted of using this vehicle to joyride, gather my friends, and consume as much alcohol or marijuana as we could. Eventually, this guy friend realized he was not getting what he wanted. He turned the tables around, reported that I stole the car, and pressed charges against me. So at 16, I started my downward spiral of incarceration. I now had constant supervision, a probation officer. I was in and out of juvenile facilities thereafter. The spiral included giving dirty urine samples, positive for drug and alcohol screens, stealing from the department stores, failing to comply, more like refusing to comply with probation rules and home supervision monitors, along with all the other along with other juvenile delinquent activities. While in this lifestyle, alcohol and marijuana played a big role in my decisions. I believed that I believed it was a way out of my abusive home because the actions I would commit were always so mindless. I didn't receive any guidance from mother or family. The things I learned from them were how to hold my liquor and how to smoke from a pipe. I was very self-destructive and I hated my life. Eventually I became more addicted. I felt empty. All these addictive habits meshed into my first marriage at 19. This relationship will become a combination of the lies that were told to me and the lies that were told to me that I believed were true. My marriage was full of so much verbal and physical abuse that it caused my anger to breed further and develop. It manifested to the extent that I felt such a sense of powerless torment and bondage that I did what I knew best. I became even angrier. All these circumstances created a world of complete chaos for me. I made many more poor choices, one after another, realizing that the consequences of my choices would make me and my situation worse. I was hospitalized for depression and suicide attempts. I had many counselors, but I did not find one of them to be helpful. I was so codependent in my marriage that I gave in to having multiple abortions to appease my husband. I couldn't see through all my issues anymore. From pent up emotional abuse, feeling of inadequacy, and the sense that I was trapped in my circumstances. Something terrible was bound to happen. I was a walking time bomb until I eventually went over the deep end. I was doped up on psych meds and extremely depressed and had just found out my husband was in an affair for quite some time. We were together for 10 years. I put all my hope into, excuse me, this one person who I thought would love me unconditionally. As he was drinking, my husband told me that I would never leave him. Even worse, deep down inside, I knew I would never have the power to do so. One day I decided I was going to leave him. I was pleading with him to give me the car keys. He continued to heckle me and belittle me. In the midst of all the chaos, confusion, and pain, I was so desperately wanted to escape my situation that I picked up a knife and stabbed him in the leg. Our 3-year-old son was sitting right next to him. In terror, I picked up my son, ran to the neighbor's house, and called my aunt and told her she needed to come and take my son. While I was gone, my husband's family came running into the apartment and immediately called 911. The street was flooded with police and onlookers and emergency personnel. I told my son that I would have to leave him and I kissed him goodbye. I returned to my apartment complex, flagged down a policeman, and told him who I was and what I had done. I was handcuffed and once again taken into police custody for questioning. I was stripped down and all my clothes were taken for evidence. In my mind, I was hoping that my husband would not press charges against me. After all, this was our lifestyle. We drank, then we argued. That's the way it was. While being questioned, the investigator asked me, "Don't you want to know how your husband is doing?" I responded to the officer, "Of course I do. I clearly I remember it like it was yesterday." Then he said, "Your husband is dead and you're being charged with first-degree murder." I was in complete shock. It was almost as if I were in a Lifetime channel movie. I was told that the stab wound punctured his main artery, causing my husband to bleed to death. My bail was set at $1 million, and I was looking at a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. One sentence I felt I did deserve and knew I was going to get. This was my bottom. For troubles, for troubles without number surrounded me. My sins have overtaken me, and I cannot see. There They are more than the hairs of my head, and my heart fails within me. Psalms 40:12. That night in 2003, I needed to have some type of rescue from my guilt of taking someone's life, especially someone I loved. In that moment, ending my life was what I thought would be the best escape route. Before I did, before I did so, Before I did so this time, I prayed, and I remember crying out and saying the words I never thought would come out of my mouth. God, if you're real, I need you. Not realizing these little words would have so much power, that same night my world was flipped upside down. You will seek me, and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. Jeremiah 29:13. At that moment, the correctional officer let me out of jail cell and said that I had a visit from my lawyer. My lawyer told me I was being escorted by police officers to see my husband before they buried him. The impossible was done in my circumstances in a way I never would have imagined. My husband's mother unexpectedly pleaded with the warden to let me see my husband before they buried him, and the warden agreed. God was truly at work here. Principle 2 says, earnestly believe that God exists and that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. Happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. I truly recognize that when I called out to God, he heard me. I wanted to be restored. I was given a Bible and cracked it open and read. I was in lockdown for 23 hours of the day. Hours would pass and I would still be reading. I wanted more of this amazing power and peace that I was experiencing. Throughout the week, I slowly started feeling the weight of my guilt being released and feeling a peace that I couldn't explain. Even sitting in a solitary jail cell looking at prison for the rest of my life and being away from my child, I still had peace. In my whole life of seeking fulfillment with things that never stayed and lasted for only but a moment, I recognized real satisfaction and that it was only in seeking my Lord Jesus Christ. I did not get my 20 I did not get the 25 years to life sentence. I believed it was God's way of proving himself to me that I could trust him. Realizing that I had a son at home, I no longer was condemning myself to accepting life in prison. I did negotiate my sentence with God, the real judge. It started with praying about not receiving a life term, and then not being able to do the 11-year sentence the district attorney offered me. I went boldly before the throne and requesting that I get no more than 5 years. My sentence was 3 years and 8 months. I was not instantly changed. I still had addictive habits going into prison. Through Jesus, I was able to overcome many adversities while incarcerated. There were many struggles, from homosexuality to drugs and alcohol, and all of which readily available in prison. But there was a greater power working in me. Doors were opened for me to step into Bible studies where I met genuine Christian friends who wanted to be changed. I ministered to all the roommates who came and went through the years. I was later asked to work in the chapel as an usher and helped with the outside guests who came in to speak to us. The founders of Celebrate Recovery, John and Cheryl Baker, came to the Valley State Prison for women where I was incarcerated. They trained about 40 women on how to lead a Celebrate Recovery Step Studies group while in prison. This was an honor because my anger that brought me to prison was the topic of the recovery group I led for other inmates. I learned to control my anger by practicing to step back from the situation and meditate on scriptures on self-control. There were many opportunities for my anger to get out of control, but using the Christ-centered 12 steps in the biblical comparisons were a perfect outline to use to work through my struggles. Surprisingly, while in prison, I was able to obtain fulfillment, love, companionship, and self-control through the power of Jesus Christ. My desires started my desires started to change, and it became clearer what to do with my life. The closer I drew to God through prayer and learning of Him through His Word, the closer He drew to me with comfort, peace, and real friendship. I was also able to see my child often. Later, I realized how God was trying to get my attention. Prior to getting arrested, I went to a church service, responded to an altar call, asked God to come into my life. I remember feeling so broken that day. The following Sunday, my husband's sister asked if we were going to church again. She enjoyed it so much, but I told her, "No, I feel better now." That was the day I got arrested. Before, I only called on God in trouble and forgot about Him when I thought things were going my way. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before Him. 1 Corinthians 1:27 through 29. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted and proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. Isaiah 61:1. As I as I was getting closer to release, I was filled with so much anticipation what God was going to do with my life. I knew stepping out of those gates that my life was new, because it was already transforming into something new while I was incarcerated. God compelled me to make a new and different choices that allowed my recovery to be successful. I now been home for 4.5 years and discharged from supervision. God has transformed many things in my life since spending time in prison. I have a great job where God is using my gifts, and I have experienced and embraced job stability. It feels great to have an employer who trusts me with the keys to the business. My relationship with my parents are growing and being healed. I am experiencing the blessing of being a mother to my son. I was given a second chance at marriage with a godly man. My husband and I have done missionary work and led Bible studies together. We are members of a church in the San Francisco area and participate in our Celebrate Recovery program. I have been privileged to help with the Angel Tree Project, which gives Christmas gifts to children whose parents are incarcerated. I have been cleared to go into San Francisco jails to minister to hurting men and women in post-abortion recovery. In prison, while studying my Bible, I would just start daydreaming and pretending that I was speaking to crowds about how God saved me. I would ask God, "Can you use the most painful circumstances in my life? And if so, how?" He said, "This is how. Stand and be my voice." Stout. In 2010, I shared my testimony in front of 3,000 people at Celebrate Recovery Summit. I've been invited to share my testimony at the same prison where I served my sentence. God is using me in ways that I could never have imagined. Thank you for letting me share. And that's the end of Jamie's testimony, which I found very, very awesome. Celebrate Recovery is amazing. I'm an AA man, don't, but Celebrate Recovery is going to give me an opportunity to lead, which was always to AA is the same way. You got to help your fellow man. Eventually, you want to get out and realize I got to do something for the world. Anyway, until next time, one Celebrate Recovery time, one Celebrate Recovery place, one Celebrate Recovery channel.